To the first Craftwork event. We're really excited to finally be doing this. We had hoped to get started last week, and then it was too cold. So thank you for coming, as it is still too cold. But it seems silly to try to cancel 2 of these in a row, so thank you very much for coming. I'm going to assume most of you know about Craftwork. We're a multi-platform project with a series of artist lectures like the one that you're going to see tonight, and then followed by a series of workshops which are free and open to the public. So tonight Jessica is going to be doing a workshop in crochet. So please stick around after the lecture to check that out. And then in April, we'll be having a gallery exhibit. So the opening for the gallery exhibit is April 12th. So please, it's in this space. So come on back and check out the space. Will be transformed with all of the work from our amazing artists. And we have a couple of artists in the audience and the table who are showing work. Where you want to raise your hands. Just come here. I'm really excited about it. So that'll be really exciting. So that's April 12th. So every other Tuesday, starting from tonight, there'll be an event. The last event is April 8th, and that is the Tuesday before the opening, which is April 12th. Friday, Tuesday, yes. So we'll be doing stuff from now until then. So it's going to be really exciting. So yeah, I think we can get started. So if you guys just want to do say your name and your craft, and then we'll come back and you'll get to see a little bit of everybody's work. I'm gonna grab a bottle of water.
I'm Lucy Knisley. I'm a comic artist and author, and also work as a freelance illustrator.
I'm Jessica Pleyel. I actually am an intermediate artist, so I do a little bit of performance, sculpture, and then some craft-based work.
I'm Nora Renick Rinehart. I started Craftwork with Rachel Wallace, who will be here later. But in my daily life, I teach art classes, mostly textile classes at the Lowell Street Art Center, and I'm a practicing studio artist. So I feel like with that, we can get started with the slideshow. So you can go to the first slide. That's the last slide. That's going to be a problem. But it's a great slide. Spoiler alert. Let's see. Yeah, go to the next one. That's the first one. Can you just scroll down on the left there? Let's see how out of order they are.
We could set up the remote thing.
On your thing?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's the bottom? Yeah, that seems in order. We can wing it. We'll go back to the top for my final slide. Okay, so yes, studio artist. That's me. That's my hand. Going up my notes. I am a practicing studio artist. I have a background in fibers from the Maryland Institute College of Art, but at the moment, most of my work is based off of this photographic series. So this is a series that spanned 10 months of 2013, wherein I took a photograph every day that matched the color of the sky to a commercial paint swatch. And so there's 10 months of these photographs, and then I've done a number of pieces that are offshoots from this. So I did a series of flags, and I did a collaborative wallpaper installation at Lowell Street Art Center. But I'm not going to show this work because it's on my website, which you can see up the top left corner, which was actually a really interesting way of thinking about putting together this panel. So today's panel is drawing the line, art, craft, non-art, and non-craft. And so we're bringing these 3 artists specifically together to talk about how we draw the line between art and craft, and what about those skills that are still skills and that are still legitimized by paying jobs, but are not necessarily either deemed to be art or craft. So these 3 artists specifically, me included, were brought together because we have skills that are valued monetarily, but not necessarily by either of those terms. So looking through examples of that kind of work, and then trying to start a conversation around that. So we're going to be talking a little bit after each one of us does a presentation about some questions about this, and then we'll open it up for audience questions at the end. So I recently went through the process of trying to build myself a new website. Feel free to grab a chair anywhere. There's some over here if you don't want to sit in that front row of emptiness. I went through the process of trying to build myself a new website. I hadn't been making work in a number of years. I felt like I was really not making much of anything. And it ended up being really hard to figure out how to categorize what it was that I had been doing in that time in the same structures as my fine art practice. So Joe, if you go to the next slide. This is the front page of my website. I ended up going with the categories collaborations, commissions, fine art, and sellable wares. And even though those were a wide-ranging group of topics, there was still a lot of stuff that I've been doing that couple of year period from when I moved from Philadelphia to here, of things that didn't fit into any of those categories. So all of the stuff that I'm going to show you in the rest of the slideshow are things that aren't on my website, and they're things that I don't show in my portfolio. They're also related to one another for a couple of other reasons. One is they display constructed objects, so they're objects that have been made, so crafted, and they represent ways in which I've been able to make money and support myself as an artist. So if we go to the next slide. My first job out of college was for Viv Pickle Custom Handbags. It's a handbag shop in Philadelphia, and the whole idea of the shop was that customers could choose their fabric and their style, their pockets, their handles, and then they sent that order to the shop, and the shop made the handbags. So I was a seamstress for them, and my entire job was just putting together the handbags. That's all I did, all day, every day. I didn't have to do any of the cutting. I didn't have to do any of the prep work. I just sewed all day long. I got paid by the piece, which meant that speed was of the essence. And by the time I left there, I was making maybe 14 to 16 handbags a day, which is crazy. But it wasn't really super fulfilling work. It was reliable, and I learned a really great skill, like with my hands, like my sewing skills just multiplied. It was fantastic. But I found myself really needing to like work outside of the boundaries of like what I was doing brainlessly every day. So if you go to the next slide, I started making bags of my own. So this is a bag I made for my friend Nellie, and it's based off of their pattern, just with commercial fabrics put together to be super functional. And from here, I did a lot of my own sort of design work, and I started selling things on Etsy, and I started making them. And I think that I ended up taking that slide out because I wanted to show work that had compromised ownership. So I felt like I owned a lot of the things that I made with the skills that I learned from that shop, but most of the stuff that I made there didn't feel like it was mine. So I ended up taking that out because it was just not part of the series. So if you go to the next image. Just kidding, I put one in. I made that. It's commercial fabric. If you go to the next one. Yeah, okay. So this is another example of a project that I did with and for other people. In Philadelphia, there's a really fantastic place called the Fabric Workshop and Museum, it's started in, I believe, the 1950s, and it does programs where they bring in artists and they do collaborations with a team that work at the Fabric Workshop to do large-scale installations. They've also worked with a number of really famous artists to create this fantastic archive of works with screen-printed yardage from really big-name people from the last 50 years, and then lesser-known artists. So I was working for an artist named Paula Wilson, and she's primarily a printmaker, but she came in and she proposed a really large fabric installation into one of their larger gallery spaces. So they hired me, and they were like, all right, we're doing this architectural facade thing. I don't know. Here's the internet and some felt. Show me what you can do. And I was like, so I did, and it was a really fantastic, it felt really collaborative. They really trusted the skill set that I came in with, and we made some really fantastic stuff. So this is me sewing on our giant industrial sewing machine of doom named Consuela, and sewing some really large pieces. You can go to the next one. So this is sort of, that's probably this almost the same width as this room, and it's made out of 1/2-inch industrial felt, and we're just mocking up the piece. You can go to the next one. This is us trying to sew it all together. So in those spaces where that white paper was in the previous image, those were replaced by faux stained glass organza collages that were made using screen prints, giant screen prints by the artist, and then she would cut and layer and sew. And so we had stitchers that were doing some of the sewing on that while she was doing some of the screen printing, and then it was my job to build the facade and engineer the facade so that it could hang in the space and also be flexible enough to ship. She was usually located in New Mexico. So we had to ship it, and then it had to be able to be rehung in other galleries later. So it also had to be archival. So all of that information had to go into making this piece. But it was really satisfying and huge to try to put through the sewing machine. It took like a team of like 6 people. And you can go to the last slide in this one. Yeah, so this is it installed in the space with some of the other pieces that were made for that installation. So then I left Philadelphia. You can move to the next slide. It's sideways, but it's shinier this way. I left Philadelphia and I moved to Chicago, and I got a job sewing costumes. Thanks, Joe. I got a job sewing costumes for musical theater. So the fabric workshop was really great. It was really collaborative, but it's sort of an example of that age-old master apprentice shop builds an object but the artist owns it kind of thing. I felt really good about that experience. I felt like they really valued my experiences and they trusted me as an artist to come in and to like make work with them. But in the long run, it wasn't my work, and my name is nowhere on that piece. So, that's an interesting experience. Like, Lucy and I went to see it, part of it, in New York over the summer, and I was like, I made that butt cornice. It was like a cornice shaped like a butt. And the gallery was like, no, you didn't. They thought I was crazy. I wasn't. But yeah, so then I moved on to working in musical theater. So this is the first skirt they had me build at the Drury Lane Theater in Oak Brook. No pressure, thanks. It's got strings and strings and strings of very expensive rhinestones. And that skirt is, you can see at the waist area, it's held together with magnets because she had to take it off really quickly on stage as part of a musical number. This is when I learned that it's all about making things easily removable in theater. That's like the number one priority of theater, is being able to take it off fast. So you can go to the next slide. So with a fibers background, I was able to bring a lot of skills to the table for theater. So this is an example of doing just a little bit of dyeing for a large cast. So they would have me dye lots of things that we didn't have space to do in the theater. You can go to the next one. But mostly I was making really short hot pants for male dancers. These were for Xanadu, which is on roller skates. And I built those from scratch. Everyone seemed very impressed. They were very shiny. Mostly they would bring me things that were made in the real world, and they would say, we need these gold hot pants to be tighter and shorter, and I would do that. Yeah, you can go to the next one. That's a giraffe also on its side. So another thing that I did for these guys was I did some distressing, which means that I made stuff look older or worn. So this is the system we rigged to distress tights. So it's for the show Sweeney Todd. So we put the tights on Poots, that's Poots, the giraffe, and then I applied bruises and blood spatters and dirt and grime and mold to the tights that she could then wear. It's great. You can go to the next one. And then I got to do some really fun construction stuff. So this is a suit that I built for Tracy in Hairspray. This is her fat suit. And so I got to know a lot about the human body. It was great. I saw a lot of naked people. I built a lot of naked people. And you can go to the next slide. You can see it in action. That's my shop manager wearing it. You can see it gives her some curves. But the thing that I really liked doing the most was building costumes. So if you go to the last slide in this series, in this set. The next one. So this was a skirt that I built for Gypsy out of poly organza, all cut on circles, and then baby marrow serged along the edges and sewn to a substrate. And then I was like, it's not even a skirt, it's just like a butt flap. And it has like a shiny jingly thing in the front. This was for her like big stripper number. This one is also attached by magnets because she had to take it off quickly on stage. Because she was a stripper. That's the show Gypsy. Spoiler alert. And I liked working in theater because there's always a new problem to solve, and you're working with a team to build something that's greater than some of its parts. But again, you'll notice that all of the photos that I included in this series were stuff from the shop, and they're things that are unfinished, and they're stuff in process. And that's because that's the only part of that I ended up owning. So all of the photographs that are taken on stage belong to the theater. And so I don't have access to those unless I go to them specifically and like, I'm applying for a theater grad program. Can I have access to these photographs? And they say, no, you left under bad circumstances. Which I did. But so those things aren't mine. But these pictures that I took in the shop they're like kind of mine. Because I made that and I'm really proud of it. So you can go to the next one. So since leaving the theater last April, I've been primarily working as a teaching artist, so I'm doing a lot more studio work, like that first slide that we saw. And I've also been doing freelance. So this is a freelance project that I did for the mother of someone that works at Lil Street, and she had a wall treatment. It's like that fabric on the top left. And she wanted pillows to match her wall treatment. So she brought me some of the fabric, and I did dye swatches, and I had help and made the image for the screen printing. And then you can see in the next slide, those are the pillows that came out. So she wanted something that was close to the wall, but not exactly like the wall. So I put that together. So I do some work like that. And then you can go to the next one. And then, as it turns out, you can make kind of a lot of money selling to the right groups of people. So I've started doing some nerds things that I sell on the internets. This is a shirt based on Thorin Oakenshield's armor from The Hobbit. I've sold one, but it was worth it. You can go to the next one. And this is the one that's really actually made me the most money since I left the theater. So this is the wallpaper from 221B Baker Street in the BBC Sherlock. And because I am a human and not Redbubble, I can screen print over the entire surface of the shirt instead of just like right here. So I can still do something that a machine can't. So I can make these shirts for people. And so this is just screen print on the front. And these became pretty popular. So if you go to the next one, you can see I've also done some commissions. So this is a dress that I made for a woman for a convention earlier this summer. And I also sell yardage of this, and it makes me a little bit of money. Super rewarding, community building. I love all of these people. They're nerds, and I love them. They're like my people. But I can't really market this on a large scale because copyright infringement. So it also sort of falls into this category of dubious ownership. So those are all my slides. So these are sort of all the things that I've done in the past 5 years that are like constructed objects that I got paid for, but I don't own. And then if you go back to the last slide, it's very important now. The very first, I guess it's the first one. Yes. Yeah, and that will be me screen printing in a Chewbacca costume.
Awesome.
With all my contact information. Yeah, so I guess that's my talk. Either one of you want to go next?
I can go. I can go. Mine is not as orderly, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I will totally go next. I talked a little bit about how I am more of an intermediate video artist is kind of what I do a lot of. So yeah, but I actually started doing a lot more craft-based things because I'm a sculptor. I do a lot of casting, mold making, those kinds of things. But then, my dad got deer on my swing set as a kid, and I freaked out. I was 5 years old. I was like, I love outside. I'm gonna go on my swing set. And then my dad's there with this deer, foggy eyes, the smell of blood, and I say, what is that? And he goes, oh, that's dinner. Yeehaw! My dad's this Cajun guy from the bayou, and he was like, oh yeah, this is where meat comes from. Duh. And then I run in the house crying, freaking out, and me and my dad kind of stopped being friends at that point, and I didn't eat meat, and it was just a really kind of struggle. And so you can go to the next slide for sure. So a way to mend that was to say, well, I like to make things with my hands, and my father likes to make things with his hands. He is really big into decoy making as well as taxidermy, because those are ways in which he can hunt the animals that he's interested in, as well as showcase his work afterwards. And so for a way to mend that relationship, I thought, well, what better way than to try making a decoy together? So you can see here, one of us did each side. I think there's other slides of that. I'm not sure if they're in order. But there's another one that we did. So we did his favorite animal, which are ducks. Oddly enough, there was a kind of interesting politics behind this as well, gender politics, because as a kid, I got to go and cry because my mom said, no, she's a girl, let her cry. But my dad had to kill his pet duck as a 7-year-old boy, and he had kidney disease, and that was his only friend. And so it was this really, he stayed in bed for a year and had his pet George. And he had to go outside one day, and they were a poor family in the South, and his dad's like, and if you were a real man, you'd kill it yourself. So my dad had to wring this duck's neck. It was this big pet duck, George. They had other ones. He said, can't we let it free in the park? We have other ducks we can eat. We don't need to kill George. And his dad's like, no, come on, be a man. And so he reined the duck's neck and then became obsessed with ducks. He wanted to shoot every duck he saw. And, and I think it comes to this strange realization that in a way we both loved the animal. I think the respect and the understanding of how to respect animals is something I didn't understand that my dad did indeed have. But so we made these ducks together in collaboration. There are some slides from the video. I'm not sure if they're in order, but we'll just keep looking at the cool ducks. But so I said, okay, Dad, I'm going to set up this video for you. I'm going to listen in. Tell me how to do it. So he goes, okay. And so he's carving away, and he's saying, well, first you have to, shape the form. And these are things, some of these things I'm like, yeah, it sounds kind of like sculpture. But then he starts talking about George. And I'm like, okay, this is getting interesting. And then he starts opening up about this craft and how much he loves this craft because his father, who died when he was young, did this craft. And his father's father did this craft. And so it's got this genealogy to it. And this deeper meaning than just, I use this to hunt. It wasn't just about the use anymore. It was about the emotions and the family relationships and this yearning for companionship. And then through that, I kind of thought, well, we're both doing that right now. So that was a really interesting way to bring it back to that. You can go ahead. And so I kind of got the guts up and I said, okay, well, he was like, I really want you to at least come watch me do some taxidermy. It's a really big deal. I've done it since I was a kid. I really think you'd like to do it. I think you'd get interested. And so I kind of knew it was a manipulation because I knew he's like, okay, she's going to hunt next. I knew that's what he was going for. But I said, okay, I'll go. And then, so we sat in the basement. I got my video camera out, and he had this beautiful wood duck that he shot. And he said, oh, and by the way, I made sure to shoot it in the chest and not in the head so we could do this today. And he was very, very proud about it. Very excited. Thanks, Dad. And so he showed me the process, and it was very visceral, very bloody, very intense at the beginning, and I was kind of nauseous, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. But then what really got my attention was when he was fixing it back together. It was hand stitching, very delicate hand stitching, and then he picks it up gently and starts blow drying it with my pink hair dryer. and it's just this blend of something that I hadn't seen a lot in my father before, this very sincere, sensitive, quote-unquote feminine craft, mixed with this very visceral, quote-unquote masculine craft. And then I was kind of questioning this gender binary and kind of working through that on my own. I was already doing some work dealing with feminism and gender identity, but then this kind of even helped that go a little further. I got a little more interested in the role within hunting. And so I did a lot of work playing with the protagonist and antagonists within the realm of hunting. So you can go ahead. And then my most recent projects have been dealing with crocheting over skulls, over animal bodies. And the reason for that is, I've kind of gone a little bit away from taxidermy because for me it feels a little problematic. As a vegetarian, as an animal rights activist, I feel comfortable doing that with my father and appreciating what he does and appreciating the craft and the beauty, and the heritage in that. But it's not my favorite thing. Even if it is roadkill, which is kind of fun. But anyway. So I started saying, well, how can I mend this? How can I talk about the loss that happens when this animal passes away? And so what I got really interested in was, again, taking this craft. I'm seeing my father do the stitches, and then I think, well, as a kid, it was very interesting because, I wanted a relationship with my dad, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I was always a tomboy, and my mother always wanted me to sit and knit with her or sit and sew, and I was like, ain't nobody got time for this. Like, I want to go outside, I want to run, I want to get dirty, I want to go look at the weird animal skulls that are underneath the house, because we'd always have possums go die under our house, real country living. But and so that was something that I still had this weird obsession with death and with the animals that had unfortunately demised. But then as I went through college, I got much more into craft. I did a lot of costume work when I was in Africa. I was doing a lot of traditional costume work. And then I learned how to crochet through school, and through my best friend actually taught me. And I said, well, what better way to sit and contemplate than to do this craft, where you just kind of are sitting there stitching, meditating over the way this animal died. So this one actually was my father's best hunt. He let me use it, so that was kind of exciting. And me and my brother broke it when we were kids. So we hit it off the wall, it fell, part of the skull broke off. So for this project, I used kind of a creamy color yarn because I wanted it to relate to the bone. And then I actually made that piece back into it, so trying to mend this skull back together. And I was doing this, and then I titled each of the pieces relating to the animal that was killed and how it was killed. And you can go ahead to the next one. And this was actually a horse from a friend's farm who died maybe 20 or 30 years ago now of colic, which is an intestinal issue. And so just again, kind of mending and playing with different colors at this time. This one was actually very moldy when I got it, so I was playing with relating the colors that are on top with the actual mold underneath. I also utilized the teeth in a little bit of a different way. I was interested in the way the teeth looked and how they were worn, and so I wanted to kind of showcase that. You can keep going. For these pieces, again, just kind of playing with this meditation of death and kind of giving this animal a new life through these tissues and sinews that are the crochet versus actually being the body mass. You can go to the next one. Yeah, just kind of a detail shot. If you guys are interested in seeing any of my video work or performance work, I'd be more than happy to give you my website. It's pretty simple, Jessica Pleyel, which is a really funky spelling last name, .com. But yeah, it's on the Craftwork website too, so feel free to check it out. And I think that's most of mine. That guy, yep, just another detail. And then here was me and my father working. So again, this is a full-fledged video. I also have videos of me and him narrating his best hunts, where we went to each location of the best hunt in a future time, and then we talked about it, and kind of this ephemeral moment for us. That was an ephemeral moment for him, and now is a different moment for a viewer. So again, playing with painting and just all the different kind of blending of art and craft that me and my father did. I don't make any money doing my art. I'm just going to be honest, but my dad does sometimes. He makes decoys for hunting. He also makes taxidermy projects for people. So it's interesting that, I have all these ideas and stuff, and my dad's just like, I make stuff, and it gets sold, and that's good. But now he's taking painting classes, which is really interesting. And so I think, is that all from me? Yep. So thank you guys. Great.
Just a moment to thank Joe, our
Yes, thank you.
our technical support.
I think I'm going to give my presentation to standing because my neck is starting to break
Sorry.
off. So I'm going to stand over here.
So you guys' neck can break off now for a little while.
Sorry. Back and forth. Oh, mine's backwards. Oh no, it's not backwards. The last slide is the first.
That's what happened to mine.
Oh, yeah, it's weird. I don't know. Again, my name is Lucy, and I'm a comic book artist and author. Can I just point? Is that okay?
You can use the force.
I have a number of books, published graphic novels that I've been working on. And then I also do a lot of freelance comic work for various publications and freelance illustration for certain things. I also keep a webcomic online, Stop Paying Attention, which is updated whenever I feel like it. I also do logo illustrations for certain organizations that push me to do them. So the thing that I really love about comics, especially in relation to craft, is that comics are this really universal thing. Pretty much everyone has read one, and almost everyone has made one, whether you realize it or not. Often you see comics through the lens of children's books, television shows, computer animations, that sort of thing. You see it a lot in advertising, especially children's advertising. And then there's what we sort of think of as the typical comic, the Superman, that kind of cartoony comic. But there's a really rich history in this craft. It goes back, many years ago. This is a Victorian cartoon about certain political time. Or no, sorry, this is a World War II era, Civil War era political cartoon. This is the Victorian one. If anyone understands what this is about, it's very topical, I'm sure. There's this triptych from Renaissance era time, celebrating the 3-panel format and the ever-popular text scroll, which is still used in comics today. And this comic about a group of farmers going about their daily life. So as you can see, the graphic narrative has really kind of been this theme throughout human existence. This particular comic is one of my favorites. So as soon as man could create images to tell a story, they were doing that. They were recording their life, their history in this pictorial form. So comics are this really great way to kind of reach back through the ages and connect with that storytelling tradition. One of the ways that a lot of you might recognize in the top right, one of the ways that a lot of people make comics today is the drawing on the phone trope, the doodling while you're having a conversation with the bank, while you're on hold, that sort of thing. And a lot of people, even people who claim never to draw ever in their life, most people will do this just out of habit. Okay? This is my stepsister's book that I stole. She is a very A-type transportation engineer. So what she does is she figures out the bus routes and stuff, which is something that I cannot comprehend. And throughout our lives, she was always talking about how I was the creative one. She was the analytical one. She didn't know how to draw a straight line. She was very, very uncreative. And then I was looking through her notes one day, and I saw these really cool dot buses that she makes. She makes these on a lot of pages in her book. So I think this is awesome, and I love it. And it really proved to me that this act that everybody can tell these stories through pictures. To me, this shit is better than Garfield, but whatever. Jim Davis has sort of fallen out of it. Okay. So something that I hear a lot in my work is that comics are, I don't read comics are for kids, that sort of thing. And I think this is really silly. Besides being kind of insulting to say that to somebody who does this for a living, I don't understand how they can fail to see the presence of comics in our media and all entertainment. And something that we all do is make comics as kids. This is a great story about a pharaoh and pyramids, and it's incredible. And this is something that comes really naturally to us. We all start out telling these stories through pictures. Comics have also been linked to aiding kids in the development of reading, especially for children who have learning disabilities. Comics have brought us amazing characters like Wonder Woman, Little Nemo. They keep print publication alive in an age of print apocalypse. They create the structure and the backbone for movies, television, and video games. And they embrace the solitude and silence of reading while simultaneously filling your head with boom, splats, and kapows, which is a really incredible thing when you think about it. Comics which have sort of bridged this gap between digital and print media in a way that prose perhaps hasn't quite reached. And so the next time you're on the phone doodling away and thinking about your bank, your mortgage situation, but you're also drawing amazing squids like this one, just know that you're reaching back to this time in your life when you told stories really instinctively like this. You're reaching back to the earliest form of humanity, and you're also reaching back to Batman, which was my first slide. So thank you very much.
Okay. Turn this back around this way. It's very professional here. So now I have just a couple of questions that we had. Yeah, that one's very important to say.
No, it's very important that we address Batman.
Yes.
Word.
Yeah.
As Batman says.
In the words of Batman. Word.
Back in the
A couple questions just for us to sort of spin off of, to talk about this topic a little bit more. And then we're going to open the conversation up to the audience for audience questions for a little bit before we break and then start the workshop. So the first question that I have is, before the conversation of art versus craft, we can even question craft versus trade, i.e. a skill set that affords a worker a livelihood but is excluded from either art or craft. In your experiences, how do you feel we make these delineations, R, class, and gender, and other factors? It's a little bit of an open question.
I found that question very confusing
I
when
did
you
too.
sent it to us. I was like, so is this
confusing.
about art, craft, trade, gender, politics? What is the question delineating? Because there were just a lot of
Parts of that
choices.
question. Yeah.
Maybe start out with part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. We can totally do that. It's been an ongoing process with craft work, because every time we talk to someone, they're like, "So what is the difference between art versus craft?" And we're like, "Yes." So trying to whittle it down to like smaller questions has been probably our largest challenge. It was like easy to get to topics and then harder. I think one that we sort of all touched on in our talks that maybe we can speak to more specifically would be that of opportunities and gender. The next question actually is, can you speak to an experience that exemplifies an existing structure? And for me, the one that I was thinking the most of is sort of gender. So do you experience any sort of implications of your gender in the way that your craft is dealt with in the world? Is that a better
Yes,
way to put it?
definitely. Okay. I mean, comics sort of walks the line between art and art, craft, writing. There's a lot of classifications and a lot of people that don't qualify it for certain things. But what it has always clearly been is sort of a boy art, a boy medium. And I've always read comics. I grew up reading comics. I didn't think there was anything wrong with it until I became a professional, and people were like, "Ooh, a lady comic artist," and I was like, "Is that weird? I don't understand." So I've always sort of experienced it a little bit. I'm lucky because I think that the comics world is changing a lot right now, and women are embracing it a lot more. And it's interesting also to see that what women are doing to the comics world, sort of moving away from the superhero, horror, grim kind of comics world into more personal storytelling stuff, which really brings to mind the idea of craft and how sort of this storytelling through pictures and this sharing of this world through your art is called to mind as more of a craft when it is told in that way, rather than looking at it as a product, which I feel a lot of the sort of Marvel superhero comics are more products than the personal stories that I see coming out these days, when a lot more people are interested in telling those stories.
I guess for my experience, a little bit different, but still similar in the fact that, I grew up with a very Southern family, with a very Southern mother who stayed home and cooked and sewed and crocheted, and my father was the one who hunted, worked, and then made decoys. And so in those ways, it was strange when I kind of was playing around with these things, because my dad's like, "Oh, well, why are you doing this?" What, And it was even growing up, my father would often tell my brother, "Oh, come with me, come do this taxidermy, come do this decoy, come go hunting." And my brother was a video game guy, and he's like, "Nope, I'm going to stay here and do this." And then my dad he wouldn't even ask. He would just kind of say, "Okay, well, I'm going by myself." And then I'd be like, "Oh, okay." And then Mom would be like, "Well, baby, now you want to come do that sewing project?" And I'm like, "No." I mean, it's funny because I embraced it a lot later in life, but when I was a kid, I was just like, "No, Mom." So I think that was something I really strived to do, was to play with these, stereotypes that my family had, and play with the stereotypes of craft and the different forms of craft. Man craft is to hunt something and kill it. Woman craft is to cook it or make something warm for her husband to wear. What is that? Like, what does that mean? And I think those were some of the things I was questioning and playing with, and how to kind of syncretize these things.
It seems like a real marriage, the sort of the hunting aspect with the crocheting aspect. It's like directly taken from your mother and father's roles in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's what I was really interested in playing with. I guess I haven't gotten, other than my father's initial freak out, "Why are you talking to me? Why do you want to do this?" I really haven't had too much question, which I'm surprised I haven't had more questions. Who knows, maybe I will today.
Do your parents like your work?
They do. My mom gets jealous, actually, oddly enough. My mom, because me and my mom grew up, and I was extremely close with my mother. Me and my dad, me and my mom had more political views that were similar, more, she'd let me be a vegetarian, those kinds of things, whereas my father was very strict the opposite way. And so now it's funny because she's kind of got a role reversal where my dad, right when I come in the door, is like, "Look what I've been doing, look at this, think about this, what about a project with this, and so it's turned into this collaboration where my mom's like, "Well, where's my spot?" So I mean, that's really the only thing, but I think, me and my dad, I'm extremely grateful that he wanted to do it, and I'm extremely grateful that this piece became a relational art piece and not just my own concepts.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me too, because it feels like both of you are working in these traditionally male-dominated spaces, and that might be changing, but it does affect the way that you're working. Whereas, like, well, you could see from the things that I was doing, like, most of the stuff that I've done has been predominantly fielded by women. So, like, I went into a program that was mostly women, and then I made handbags, which was by women, owned by women, run by women, made for women, by women. There was one dude, but he did not last very long. Fabric Workshop was predominantly women.
Yeah, but all the boy shorts.
I did make a lot of bubble boy shorts, yes. They were like... So theater is not only women, but costumes really are. And what struck me on a lot of these different jobs that I had were that they were transient in nature. So the working paid by the piece at the handbag shop was great work when you can get it, but it was not reliable, right? I could only make that work for a certain amount of time. And then the Fabric Workshop was a short gig, right? And then theater we were never sort of like part of that structure of that place. Like, we were always contract workers, even though I worked there for 2 years. Whereas when there were people who were hired to do things like lights and electronics and tech and set, they were contract workers too, but they were all part of a union. So I had a question about like structures, if you see like any sort of structural changes happening around the structures that like keep these expectations in place, and whether you had any ideas or any like examples of projects or movements that you've seen that are breaking down any of these structures. And the only one that I could think of, and I made this question, so I apologize, was labor unions. Seeing that labor unions starting to like stand up for like smaller, like stagecraft unions becoming more popularized and stuff like that. But they're still prohibitively expensive, and so it seems like those structures are still really rooted. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or if either of you also had any other...
The way that the unions are changing is that they're becoming more women-friendly, or is that what you're saying?
A little bit. So in stage unions, theater unions, you have the Actors Equity Guild, which is like all actors have to be in it to be part of a paid performance piece. And then for a majority of the stagecraft, so like electronics, set, props, a bunch of them, you have to be in the union in order to make work on a show. And it's not true for costumes, but as I was researching for this today, there is now a costumes union in Chicago. It's prohibitively expensive, so unless you have like a full-time job, like legitimate job, like doing this, like you can't afford to be part of it. But that affords people the ability to have benefits and
legitimizes this act of making in
exactly
a very interesting way. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's something that's really interesting is, in my experience, is nonprofits. There's quite a few nonprofits that are doing extremely well due to this craft kind of infiltration within the internet. I think that's really helped kind of make this a more, I think, people being able to connect further. I worked with a nonprofit when I was in Ghana called Oban, which was young women who were street workers, less than a penny a day in essence. And they come to this group, Oban, and they learn English, they learn math, they get therapy, they get help for their children, and then they learn a skill, they learn a craft. So I was helping teach some of them sewing skills, and we were making these beautiful bags, and they've just made so many, it's just an awesome way that this nonprofit has been infiltrated all over the east side of the United States. You know, there's lots of little shops coming up, there's lots of parties happening for this group, and they're really doing a good job of respecting the craft and where it was made and how it was made. You know, the batik fabricating, the inside being insulated with plastic, water sachets, those kinds of things. And I think that it was really kind of a consideration that these people all over are really appreciating that. And in our city, there's a lot of small business based in craft. I think a lot of the young female artists in town are just kind of infiltrating. Of course, Grand Rapids is quite a bit smaller than Chicago, so it's a little bit different in that regard. But
I went to a graduate school for comics, and at the time that I was there were 3 women in the class, a class of about 30 people. And the current classes are split about 50-50 at this point. And this is only in 7 years since I went to grad school. So in the 7 years since, it's been, it's been much more legitimized for women to be making comics. And for, I think, people to be embracing more of the craft of comics, less of the product, and more of the hand-stitched books, screen printed zine covers, that sort of thing. That's becoming a lot more seen and acceptable in the comics world, which is really nice to see.
I think that's an interesting thing to say, is kind of this turn back towards tangible tactile craft.
Yeah.
You know, the printmaking, screen prints, those kinds of things are really a big deal now. And I think this, even having something handmade versus buying a scarf at the store, to have something that, oh, my friend made this for me and I bought it from a store downtown where all of my friends work. I think that kind of community thing and that kind of tangible thing is really popular right now. And I think that that's an interesting
I know, I hope it's not a bubble.
I do too.
Me too.
Great.
Well, my follow-up question to that would be, can we make this, or is it possible to make this sustainable enough to be a living? So, to have these things that we make, and I think on a scale of making money from it and not at this table, we represent a little bit, but do we feel like this kind of making is going to be a sustainable life choice?
Well, it's interesting because we each take our craft to a different place. For the most part, in my job, because I have to do this is all I do, I have to take this craft and make it a product. I have to sell it. It seems like you take your craft to the fine arts realm, which is, historically not as much of a product-based commerce thing.
Yeah.
And Nora, you sort of take your craft to sort of larger projects, it seems. And so it's interesting to sort of see where these crafts go, where we put our energies, and how that sort of changes the way that our crafts are valued, at least monetarily.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just kind of the differing levels, and it's interesting because I feel like I'm coming at it with such I don't even know if I want to make money doing this. I enjoy making, and I want to be an artist, but
The business side sucks.
Yeah, the business side
terrible.
isn't necessarily what I'm interested in. I don't care if it sells. I care about the concepts or what's behind it. Not saying that people who sell their stuff, you guys are just geniuses. I just can't do that. But I'm just more interested in the meanings and the way that it affects or is engaged within a community, I guess. Not saying that stuff that gets made does not do that when you make money, but
No, but it changes the craft, for
Yeah.
sure. If I was just making work that I didn't have to sell, it would be very different from what I
Absolutely.
feel that I
Absolutely.
could publish.
I think it comes back to that idea of ownership, partially.
Right.
You change what you make when it's for a different audience.
Definitely.
So when I make things for myself, they don't go into that slideshow. They have other ways of going. But I also can't make a living off of that. So I have to figure out how to split my time in such a way that I can afford to do all of those different kinds of things.
absolutely.
And each of them having different values, and then trying to figure out how they fit into my life and how they fit into my bank, and
How they fit
It's
into
a
your
full-time
time in front of the
job.
television.
very important time.
Yeah.
Either of you have any last thoughts that you wanted to say before we open it up to questions?
Did we answer all of your questions?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Awesome.
I think I got stuck at the first question I didn't read off.
That's fine.
I was
That's
like-
okay. Which is why I sent them to you a week ago.
Yep.
Okay, does anybody in the audience have any questions for us as a group, or any specific artists from the panel?
I think about the difference between men and guys is a cultural thing, because if you go over to Italy, France, all chefs will be men.
Mm-hmm.
And so women cooking, yeah, it's not. Yeah, if you look at it at a higher level, I think all the chefs are men. If you look at sewing, if you go into sewing tailor shops, you will find always men.
And clothing designers.
Clothing
Always
designers.
men. So I don't know what that is. Why it's knitting as a granny or your mother, and
It's
professionally or in India or Turkey, the men are really good in sewing over there. Is it jeans?
I think too it's the way it's the levels too.
yeah, it's
I think
access to
it's-
education.
I found
Absolutely.
it really interesting. And you were saying about hunting is really for your dad. I'm not from the US, so hunting for me and guns is like. For us, my dad would always build the car, fix the car. So and my mother was still doing cooking and sewing, and that's the same. But yeah, I think it's really cultural.
Yeah. I think for me, where I always get hung up with that too, is that it seems like you have to have enough agency and like luxury to access the education to get to that level of success. So it's more traditionally men because they have access to all of the things that they need to get those jobs, like schooling and apartments and jobs and, you know, like up and throughout that. But that could entirely also just could be a cultural thing as well.
Even for the stores, I think in tailor shops, so when they do the suit from scratch, there will be men doing it, and they're not really well paid jobs.
They can be. I mean, like in my experience, so tailoring is like
Yeah,
the
if you
age-old
tailor
art
for a
of
designer,
tailoring.
it will be a really good job,
Yeah.
I think. But tailoring for like a big company, we have a company from Netherlands, Suit Supply, and they make. You have it also in Chicago, and the tailors there, they're men, and they're Turkish or Indian.
I don't know about the tailoring situation, but as somebody who's worked in a lot of kitchens, I will say that the environment in a professional kitchen, in a working professional kitchen, is not particularly woman-friendly.
No, absolutely.
And I've found it to be a very aggressive situation. And I think what that comes from is that in the 30s, 40s, 50s in America, women were expected to stay home, and the men went to work, and they were the chefs. And then kitchens became this established bro, like guy, super masculine, competitive, like kind of angry, kinetic space. And I think that sort of didn't appeal in a lot of cases when women began to be passionate about food, when people like Alice Waters began to really want to change the food world. And they established new kitchens and new places, and sort of began to change this world. But there's still a lot of that kind of bro behavior, and I think that extends. I'm not sure about the tailoring thing because I've never worked in tailoring, but I definitely think that extends in my field, where comics and comic conventions and comic shops were very masculine places because they were established masculine places, and so women didn't feel comfortable, didn't want to be a part of it. And that's why it's such a male-dominated field and why it's slowly changing now. And I think that's true a little bit in the fine arts world. I think there's a lot more sort of flux going on there.
It feels systemic. It feels like there had been systems established to keep that the way that it was. And that, which is sort of, I think, what I was trying to talk to a little bit earlier, about how it's like that it has been that way for so long that it's hard to break into those kinds of systems without really structural changes happening from inside, and that doesn't seem to be happening. It seems to me like this new movement is very much about the movement of this craft-based culture that we have, this like DIY movement, craft movement, or like whatever we want to call it. It's really based on the democratization of the internet and having access to that space equally, because it's a new space, and it's space that has not always been dominated by men in the same way, and that people have different access to. So it feels to me really hopeful and like positive that we could build a new space in this like utopic idealized version of my brain
that would alter the real world.
Yeah.
That would alter the real world in a larger scale later on.
Well, and I think there's a lot of critique on the internet about comic culture and about
Definitely.
This, and I think that there's a lot of great third wave feminist dialogue about that culture, and I think that it's really interesting how it's kind of trickling in through the internet and hopefully going further and further. I think of communities like Tumblr. That's absolutely fantastic for these feminist mantras that come up, and they just get reblogged and reblogged and reblogged. And then you see some friction there, and some people not understanding exactly what a feminist is or exactly what that means, So I think that communication is the biggest asset that we have through the internet and through, hopefully, trickling throughout.
And the internet's great, but that's also why we're doing craft work.
Exactly.
Because we want to
need
leave our computers even when
physical
it's 8
space.
degrees outside.
Absolutely.
And talk to each other about it too. So maybe this is my ideal pie in the sky, trying to.
There's a lot of really
apply
adorable,
those.
misguided 17-year-olds on
Yes,
Tumblr who are
absolutely.
saying really cute
Oh,
things.
bless.
Trying. You tried.
You didn't even try. Any other questions from the audience? Any other directions you want to take that conversation in? About like 5 more minutes.
As someone who's been a crafter my entire life, there's this really interesting hesitancy to switch over from craft to art.
Mm-hmm.
It's made to be this really big, scary thing. Like, what do you tell people who are like kind
Well, 2 months ago I would have told you to apply to Craftwork.
I think just doing your own research about what you're interested in, what is the further meaning that you want to make from this craft that you're doing. I think going a little deeper and saying, what fascinates me? What do I think is a problem that needs to be altered or adjusted through my craft? And I'd say just a lot of research always helps me. A lot of that stuff.
And again, kudos to the internet for sort of breaking down the barriers, I think,
Absolutely.
between art and craft, and how, you know, the internet is this open gallery space for people who are, you know, it's very democratic. If someone wants to look at something online, they will be looking at it, whether it is defined as art or craft. And so I think that that's really helped a lot of people sort of embrace craft as more of a, you know, worthy spectacle along the same level of fine arts. So I think that sort of getting your work seen by as many people as possible will help to break down those barriers more and more, make art less of a super scary thing.
And I think a lot of the 70s art movement for women was super interesting. Maybe Googling like Carolee Schneemann.
Just come back to the panel we're having on the history of the craft movement.
Done.
We're going to talk about
You
that
don't even
next.
have to go on the internet. Just come back.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, like, I have different goals for making art than I do for making objects. And, like, those goals tend to be, like, starting a conversation about something that's not just the object. So talking about, like, what this piece does in the world, you know, and that can be from an object, or it can be from an image, or it can be from something else. So when I'm trying to figure out where an object lives, I show it to a lot of people. Because if I can start a conversation about it, then I know that there's something that's happening there. And there are really fantastic ways of being able to do that. So like Lil Street, which I know you're plugged into, we've got a critique night. You can bring your stuff and show it and just talk to people about it. But again, there's also the internet. So like putting it online and opening it up for a conversation, just showing people,
Take
showing
good pictures of it.
Yeah, that's
That's
actually
really important.
That I feel like that is a
documented.
huge thing in the craft world, like
Absolutely.
terrible pictures of your work, and it's like, come on, that's a beautiful thing you made. Like,
Yeah.
get a better, don't take it with your cell phone.
Or just have a really nice cell phone.
Yeah.
And some photo editing stuff on there.
Yeah, and like lighting.
Yeah, natural
Lighting's
light.
pretty nice. Lighting's
Yeah.
pretty important.
So documenting your work is the first step of showing it to people, I guess, too. And then, like, after showing it to people, just, like, looking to see what a good, like, place for a reception would be for that. So, like, there's going to be a space for every kind of work, whether it's, like, the most esoteric, most abstract work, there's a show for that, or whether it's photos of the sky, which I just got a call for. It's just photos of the sky, and I'm like, this is my chance, you know? So there's different places for different work, and it seems really daunting because it's under that auspice of fine art, but just like reading through the calls for entry on Chicago Artist Resource, you're like, oh no, I could do this, you know? Like, there's a lot of them that are not terrifying, and that are low stakes. So just like getting your feet wet too, I feel like is really good. And then you can assess whether or not you want to do that. Because maybe you'll get there and you'll have a show and you're like, wow, that was an experience. I got nothing from that. Like, that's fine. And you can go back to making your things and wearing them, and I can put them on my hand in the studio because they're socks, you know, like. And I think that there's value in that as well, but that you shouldn't be scared. Any last questions? Okay, awesome. Thank you. Let's give a round of applause for the panelists. And thank you guys for coming, and thank you guys for participating in the discussion. We're going to break for about 15 minutes. There's a small array of snacks at the bar that you guys can come and help yourself to, and we can have some people back there, some craft work people back there to help out. And then we're going to be transitioning the space into we'll probably set up some chairs in a circle over there, and there's going to be a crochet workshop starting at 8 o'clock in 15 minutes. So